let me just quickly talk to you about two programs we have. We run a sustainability incubation program at NSRCEL as well as a mobility program. The mobility program is in partnership with Maruti Suzuki. Under the sustainability incubation program, we've incubated over 45 ventures across two cohorts, and over 22 of them have received a grant corpus of 3 CR. You can scan the left side QR code to find out more about this program. It is currently open for applications. And the mobility program with Maruti Suzuki, we've incubated over 80 ventures over the period of 3 cohorts. Both of these programs come with a lot of sector expertise and a lot of domain expertise. They also have a paid proof of concept in the Maruti program. So both programs deserve a little bit of your time to understand what the best offerings are for you and what would be the best fit for you. And NSRCEL is the startup incubator at IIM Bangalore, for those of you who don't know. So if there is any questions you have about NSRCEL, please feel free to reach out to us. We will help you out with that. Okay, so that's about the programs that are open for application. Do take a look. Please go through them and let us know if you have questions. And the team is here today. Akshay and Kunin are here with us on call. They will be able to answer your questions along with myself. Yeah. Okay, that's been NSRCEL. Over to you guys at SAS Mafia, Anish, to give us a quick intro, and then let's get started with the panel. Yeah.
Yes. I don't think I can turn on my video, but then it's okay. Let me probably just...
Should be good now. Yeah.
Yes. Really sorry. I just had to log in on my mobile phone. But yeah. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for being here. And thank you to the NSRCEL team and Terrado team. I mean, actually, Aditya is from Terrado. Okay, good. NSRCEL team. So SAS Mafia here is basically an ecosystem enabler. We are kind of working with about 70 plus startups in the domain of climate tech and sustainability. At SAS Mafia, the primary goal is that we've got to get some unfair advantage to the startups in this domain. So for that, we work as an ecosystem enabler. We run multiple programs. We kind of connect our startups with angel investors, all pools of investors. We connect our startups with corporates for business. And we also run programs on education. So we run the SAS Ventures program, which is with BITS Pilani and IIT Madras. It's a full-fledged, full-credit course on entrepreneurship in the climate and sustainability space. And we also run masterclasses for students and early career professionals trying to work in the space of climate. So the idea is get the best of funds, get the best of clients, get the best of talent for our network entrepreneurs. So SAS Mafia is basically a network of entrepreneurs in the climate tech space run by the entrepreneurs for the entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anish. Okay, if we have... Okay, Aditya, okay, he's given the SAS Mafia intro. Do we have anyone from the Climate Asia team here? Okay. All right then. Okay, let's proceed with the webinar. Sorry, audience, to have kept you on hold for so long. Now for the bit that you all are here for. Aditya, over to you. And Ashish, over to you. Srinivas, over to you guys. Please take it ahead, and yeah, let's have a fruitful discussion.
Hi, thanks a lot. I'm Ashish. I'm founder of Green Tiger Mobility, and we are in the business of converting existing petrol two-wheelers into bi-mode hybrids or electric vehicle, and thereby directly impacting the climate, not only from a perspective of pollution and control, but also from a perspective of material scrapping and giving a new life to the vehicle. So we truly live, believe, and breathe, reduce, reuse, and recycle, which is the central theme of UN SDG. That's about me. Aditya, if you would like to go and introduce yourself to the the participants out here.
Sure. Thanks, Ashish. So I'm Aditya. I'm a two-time climate founder now. So previously, I was the founding member of a company called Terra.do. That's a climate education platform which helps people transition into climate. So I ran Terra for almost 4 years. Terra as a company is still running wonderfully. I made my exit earlier this year, and now I'm working on my next venture, which is still in stealth. So can't talk much about that. And I'm sure some folks would be familiar with Terra, but Terra is a great place for anybody who is outside of the whole climate ecosystem to get a very good understanding of what goes inside it, and how they can make a full-time transition towards this space. Yeah, Shini, you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Srinivas. I am from Cool Crop. Cool Crop makes solar-powered distributed cold storages for farmers so that they make more money. The cool crops, because that's what the crops need in tropical climates like India. So by doing so, we retain the freshness and the farmers get a better price, and we establish a data-informed market linkages so that is better remunerative prices that the farmers can get near farm, as near as farm as possible. So that's the short summary of what we do.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Aditya and Srinivas. I'm sure, coming from two different kind of a background, and I come from a completely different perspective, I think it'll be a great place for most of the participants to hear how the things are working out in climate tech and how they can also shape their journey in this field. So I actually wanted to understand that, a lot of people in the climate tech, when I hear, when I hear a lot of people who are working in climate tech, the challenge which happens is that while the ideas are good, the thoughts are good, uh, there is an impact which is also good. But there are very few climate tech who are actually able to make a dent into the overarching system. So basically, I wanted you to, if possible, individually talk about that. How do you see the challenges around customer adoption and scaling or basically expanding or scaling your venture uh, with the central theme of climate tech and making yourself commercially, I would say relevant into the customer mindset. So both customer adoption as well as scaling, if you can throw some light on. Srini, you would like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I think the key here, you're right, in terms of having the right kind of the lack of information about the viability or the sustainability of a climate tech firm in India, especially, because a lot of what we do is related to climate in both in a direct manner and indirect manner. Direct because when you reduce crop losses, you are reducing not only the embedded carbon, the embedded emissions, the embedded water, and so on, which are all climate mitigation related tasks. But the challenge we see is that a lot of that is, especially the losses, which are basically evaporation losses due to the high heat and moisture conditions we have in India, across India, barring a few regions, these are invisible losses which are difficult to monetize. I mean, everybody knows there is an evaporation loss happening, but the challenge is how do you monetize it? How do you measure it, monetize it, and therefore create a business case around it? So that's the one challenge that we see. And everything cannot be subsidized. That's the second challenge that we see. Therefore, the viable business case would only happen if there is some kind of a private capital that comes into play besides the government subsidy or a mitigation risk subsidy mechanism or something like that. So those are the three main challenges. I think should I leave for the second question or should I continue on the scaling challenges?
Yeah, please go ahead. I mean, if you can, because that will be relevant for the audience.
Yeah, the scaling challenges are once again, I mean, we'll drill down deeper perhaps later in the call. Are basically the three dominant access challenges. A, the access to capital, because majority of the beneficiaries are smallholder farmers who earn anywhere between 5,000 rupees to 12,000 rupees in that vicinity, across India. So that is access to capital is an issue where they cannot afford to deploy this asset as a capital expenditure, for example, unless they group themselves into some kind of a group, and that group has to have a viable business model and so on. That is access to capital element. And then the access to technology itself. For example, all of these technologies, a solar-powered cold room can cost anywhere between 7 to 20 lakhs, based on the size and so on. So the technology access has to be enabled using a business model innovation. That's what we do. And then the third is access to, let's say, resource institutions who can aggregate all these smallholders into viable groups or collectives, which is what the farmer producer companies and the farmer self-help groups, the whole idea is about that, around that. So the structures are in place, but more than the structures, what is needed is all the elements of these three challenges, right? Finance, the flesh and blood of money getting infused, technology getting infused, and the resource org structure getting kind of formed around these challenges. I think those are the three, I would say, points. Thanks.
No, thanks, Srini. Thanks, Srini. And Aditya, if you can also state, because you are one venture you have successfully exited, and you are already in the second. I would say you're not scared after the first venture's journey. So that's kudos to you. Most other founders generally are. But if you can also throw the same, light on the same point, that scaling and customer adoption, how do you see that? That'll be great.
I mean, firstly, I'm more excited, because, I mean, for a bunch of reasons, we can go into those later. And this is, first of all, I just say that I disagree with the premise that climate startups are not making a dent. And because I have, not just because I want to believe this, but also because part of what we did at Terra was to create a pool of employers which could potentially help people transition into climate, right? And we had this, I mean, we had a pool of almost 1,000 employers all over the world which are working in the space. So one thing which has been for sure is that climate itself is something which is relatively newer. So it takes time for, even for companies which are doing 100 million plus businesses, for them to become part of the zeitgeist and for people to actually realize that they're making a dent, that takes a much longer time. So yes, companies are making dent, and a lot of good stuff is already happening. More in the West, lesser in the India. And yeah, but then, as Srini said, so the first thing which, I mean, I have seen, and I can probably give a meta answer because I've seen and studied a lot of these companies across different sectors in climate, right? Is that the work which they are doing, which is again relevant to some part of the climate puzzle, it's equally important for the founders to realize that making sense from a business perspective is paramount, right? So just because you are doing something which is generally impact or generally good doesn't mean or doesn't give you a leeway to not think from a very sorted business hat, right? So 80% of just making sure it works is all of the same stuff you would hear in any other place, which is like make sure your unit economics works, make sure your ARPU is nice, your CLTV is nice, your CAC is in check, etc. All of those things, right? And which people can probably find out in a bunch of other webinars, right? What's special for the climate companies, I would say, is a couple of things. One is that they have a very clear mission and they have a very clear theory of change. And in the short term, that feels like a constraint. But what I've seen time and time again is that in the long term, that actually gives companies a lot of resilience. And that's actually a superpower which most other sectors and most other companies don't have. I mean, if you hear, I mean, Paul Graham or some other like Silicon Valley OGs, they'll just say that the number one skill you need to have as a founder is don't die. And that I feel resilience comes from being in a place where you resonate deeply with the kind of work you're doing, right? Second thing which I've realized is different for climate companies is that in most other cases, when you're doing a startup, the only kind of capital you're thinking is venture capital. But when you're doing something in climate, then there are other sorts of capital which open up, which most founders don't realize, right? And if you just look at even international numbers, like the total philanthropic capital in play is bigger than the total venture capital that is in play, for example, right? And so it's very good for early stage founders to start looking at those things. In terms of customer adoption, again, something which I've seen be a make or break is just the language, right? Because different people and different markets respond to a different language, right? And while from an investor entrepreneur perspective, it's all clubbed as climate tech. For example, if you're doing a B2C in India, people will care a lot more about, it being sustainable or it being closer to our culture, and as opposed to it being something in climate. But then if it's a B2C in Silicon Valley, then everybody is saying climate change. So climate as a language works, right? So I feel again like spending more time on just understanding what resonates with people, because it's so broad and it incorporates so many smaller aspects that it's just very easy to pitch a customer with a very long language which doesn't resonate with them. In the case of B2C, and in the case of B2B as well, a large part of it is true. When I'm having a chat with, let's say, a sustainability manager at a company which might be a potential client, now they might not care about climate change. What they are really caring about is some other metric or some other part of the puzzle which you need to really understand and then talk in those terms. So yeah, those are my 2, 3, 4 cents. Yeah.
Thanks, Aditya. That was quite enlightening. So as I can understand from both Srini and Aditya, you talked about is in this journey, while close talking to the language of the consumer rather than talking about climate, but talking the language that they understand is better, and explaining what they are gaining while saving, keeping the earth green. That's important. And at the same time, while financing is important, but Aditya, as you mentioned, there are multiple sources of finance which is over and above the traditional venture capital, and that will be a good source for a lot of the audience or the participants who are thinking to build their journey in this space. So thank you so much on that. Uh, second thing I wanted to understand is, or I wanted to take your thoughts on, that most of the businesses which are built, whether I call it the quick commerce, whether I call it even larger telecom giants or anybody like that, they work on three principles, right? Because at the end of it, it's the consumer who's paying money. So they work on a principle as in, accessibility to the consumer, affordability to the consumer, and convenience to the consumer. So while they are with a single theme of making profits, and thereby these three comes natural to them, when people are working on sustainability, a lot many times the central theme remains sustainable, uh, rather than just focusing on these three things, because it's very difficult to balance the two. So from your perspective, I wanted to understand in your respective ventures, how do you balance the two? I mean, what do you keep the central theme? Do you keep sustainability still the central theme, or you keep the customer as the central theme, like any for-profit organizations? And if you keep both, then how do you marry these two? Because I'm sure this will be a point which everybody would be asking. If not, they ask, certainly the investors would like to see it on the deck. So if you can throw some light on that, that would be great. Aditya, why don't you take this question first?
That's a curveball, because I mean there's no good answer to this question. So the way I like to think of it is the way we, at least even at Terra and even now, the framework which we have used is, there are all of these things. So there is, obviously, you need to have a solid bottom line, and then you have to have a product which people love, so something like an amazing NPS or an amazing retention, right? And then at the end of the day, you are trying to create some kind of impact. So what we had done at Terra was to differentiate these into optimizing functions and constraints. So for example, we don't want our GMV to fall below a certain number. We don't want our CAC to go, CAC per whatever, to go beyond a certain number, right? We don't want our NPS to, let's say, fall below 75. So those were constraints which we imposed, so to make sure that the business is a solid business from a conventional business perspective. But our optimizing function was always the impact. The optimizing function was always the number of people who are making a transition into climate, right? And I felt like, and obviously it took us, I mean, I'm saying it in a couple of minutes, but it took us multiple years to finally, land here, where we felt like, okay, this is something which works with our investors and also something which keeps us happy from an impact perspective. But I feel like that lens is very helpful, where you are able to, sort of filter out that one thing you really want to optimize on, and every single other thing is more like a constraint that, okay, this needs to be met, but I'm not really trying to optimize that. So yeah, that's how we went about it, and even now, even in my second iteration, that's the framework I'm definitely going to be using. So yeah.
Thanks, Aditya. Srini, you would like to take the same?
Yes, that's a very insightful question. Let me begin like that. I think most of what we deployed or we try to deploy is basically they lie at the Venn diagram intersection of all these three circles, which is the accessibility, affordability, convenience points you raised, right? So, uh, and I would address probably briefly each one of these. Accessibility, because we try, like I said, most of the post-harvest loss, which is a evaporation loss in theory, happens near farm. I mean, the moment you harvest something because of the heat and humidity, the crops evaporate, and there's a so you got to build whatever building near the farm. So that is the accessibility angle, right? You got to kind of build very close to the where it matters the most. And then, and when we deliver this, so we deliver it up, given that a lot of these farmers are not in a position to pay capital expenditure, we deliver this in a service model, which is called cooling as a service, modeling around the software as a service model, right? Business model. So the farmers affordable access is enabled by charging them a pay per use or a pay as you go or pay based on performance kind of a model. So that addresses the affordability, the dimension. And then the third, the convenience, the location of these units that we typically deploy factors, all these dimensions, the distance to the farm, the distance from the grid, the nearest substation, what is the solar insolation, intensity level, what do the weather look like, the next, past trends, future trends, and then we use all that information to kind of validate a site selection, whether it meets all these criteria. And lastly, of course, it should have the right crop mix. It cannot be a monocrop, storage catering to monocrop, which is seasonal, and then once the season is over, it becomes a kind of a dormant unit. So all these factors play a role when we decide to site our cold storage units. We do factor all these elements, and like I said, the sweet spot is at the Venn diagram intersection of all these three dimensions.
Thanks, Srini. Thanks, Aditya. So essentially, for the audience, what basically you talked about is one, they need to have a very clear focus on how to marry the two with the sustainability angle, whether they do it using a Venn diagram, whether they do it trying to figure it out what is really core to your business and how do you integrate the two. But essentially, for the most of the early stage founders out here, uh, this is a central point. So, you don't need to worry that, okay, if I have not reached there, what the venture gonna be, because this is an evolving thought and it will come over the period of time. But what is important is that you need to keep thinking about it, keep modifying, keep adapting, that you do not lose one over the second. Both needs to go hand in hand. So, uh, all I can say is the life is a little more tougher than the commercial business founders, but that's the journey we all have taken. So that's good. My third point, actually, I wanted to understand is or get your views on. While we talk about climate, we talked about philanthropical capital, we talked about making a difference, making everything. I mean, for a country like India, where everybody talks about it, everybody talks about it. Yes, there should be a solar power. But if I increase the power cost by 25 paisa, people will shift to the coal power, so that is there. And in a market like that, while we go to access the capital also, either through any of the sources, because that's the oxygen that we all need. One question which comes very often is how do you measure the climate impact? How do you measure what you are doing? How you are impacting it? Because in India, there is, I'm not fully aware, but I think the third party audit firm, which are widely available in places like San Francisco, the example which Aditya you took, and places like Germany or Europe, or even that matter, even places like Singapore and Japan, we have little less. So when it comes to like that, how do you measure it? How do you take the support to ensure that you have a quantifiable, measurable methodologies in which you can measure the impact, and how do you ensure that you remain or you are mitigating the risk where there is, because there will be a thin line as you scale up. There will be a thin line in between the measurable impact and the commercial impact. So how do you ensure that it remains sustainable over an extended period so that your core does not change? So if you can, Srini, would you like to take that first?
Yes, thanks. Uh, yeah, the challenge I see, as you rightly said, is generating the evidence, because increasingly what I see in the market is now the trend to finance assets like this has shifted to an outcome or an evidence-based finance mechanism, where people at some point, in the past, they were all, majority of the installations were grant or philanthropy capital fund, but increasingly they're going to be commercial capital or a blended model where you have commercial capital, government subsidy, and then the private capital coming in, and all based on a common theme of generating the evidence, right, for the outcomes that we want to deliver, because we all want to work, deploy these to improve the income levels of the farmers. Now, how do you measure that? That's a point. I mean, the measuring that requires, a combination of qualitative and quantitative measures, right? The good part is the technology that we put in place has all the measuring devices. Now, you have the sensors for temperature, humidity, solar PV generation. So that could be kind of taken to a platform. Now that needs to be correlated with the impact, right? Now, what is the income generated per kilowatt hour of solar? Or what is the income or the livelihood generated per CO2 of emission avoided? So all those metrics can be done if you're able to integrate the qualitative, let's say, analysis to the quantitative sensor-based data that the technology by default generates. And the third dimension is, is there are more than one or two devices to kind of bring about an outcome. It's just not about a solar panel and a cold room, and that's the end of the story. There are many other, let's say, sensing elements required, right? The condition of the crop, the weather, and so on and so forth. So, and all these come in different databases and different with their own apps. Then the challenge becomes how do you integrate all these disparate, siloed applications to a common database, and so that you can correlate everything and generate these outcomes, evidences that that a finance company can use as a basis to fund, right? So that is the challenge, and we are working on that, on all these three dimensions, because generating evidence or the absence of evidence is a big challenge. But having said that, as I think someone like Carl Sagan said, right? No, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So unless we put in place all these measuring systems, databases, and then a rigor which says unless you deliver outcome A, B, C, the finance will not come in. That I think would be a signal for people to deploy systems and accountable systems, and which can be traced and which can be kind of used as a basis for finance.
Good, thanks, Srini. Aditya, your field will be a little more difficult on this because you compete with, in Terra with various commercial ventures which have been like that. So, any take that you have?
Right. So again, so I'll come to Terra in a moment, right? But like to answer your larger question, I mean, this really depends on the sector as well as the stakeholder, right? So for example, in the case of Srini, as he mentioned, now that is true. And again, in his case, probably if the stakeholder requires you to probably provide evidence in the form of some kind of agricultural output, that is going to be very different when the stakeholder is some philanthropic organization which only cares about the amount of carbon emissions saved, right? In the overall in the industry, when you look at climate mitigation, we have a very easy language, which is to say, ki, hey, the amount of carbon emission reduced, that's your climate impact. And that's easy to measure, and there are ways and there are methods of doing that. It gets extremely tricky when you look at climate adaptation and when you look at risk mitigation, where there is no one single metric which people have agreed to, and that's probably a good thing. And therefore, depending from case to case, the metric really varies. And so I think what really matters is to understand who the stakeholder is and what are the metrics they care about. And for you, how are you measuring your impact? So now I come to the example of Terra, right? So for us, we were very clear that our theory of change is that the whole climate crisis is going to require 100x more people. And therefore, we are going to help by making or helping more people contribute towards the problem. That was our way of measuring impact. And so for us, the North Star was always number of people who have made a transition into climate, right? This metric doesn't really help a lot with, for example, investors who really care about the returns, right? So in those cases, you come back to a standard business metric, right? We also tried to apply it for philanthropy, in which case they were like, "Acha, theek hai, you are helping people transition, but can you actually tell us how it is going to ultimately, or how much change have you actually made to the whole climate problem?" And in that case, it got extremely fuzzy, and there was no way for us to measure that, right? So yeah, I mean, for any startup, you have to be in this space, I guess, extreme clarity on what your theory of change is and how you are measuring that, and then extreme clarity on who are the most relevant stakeholders and what do they care about. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, so basically, whatever I could gather from, both you and Srini is that there are certain hard-coded matrix or variables which can be measured, such as the CO2 impact and others. And at the same time, being a climate tech founder, you also need to, as Aditya mentioned, you also need to balance the impact with the returns which the investors are looking. So the life is a little more I would say we have one more step to follow and do, but that comes naturally because we all have taken that kind of plunge to get into not a commercial just founders, but as a climate tech founders. So awesome, to hear your views on it. I would like now, NSRCEL team to basically take over for the Q&A if there are any questions which our participant wish to ask. Uh, before just a request, since I have a hard stop, so just a request. If there are any questions from anyone for me personally, I'll be happy to take them first. Apologies, Aditya. Apologies, Srini. I'm being a little selfish here. But yes, if there are none, then NSRCEL can take it with Aditya and Srini.
Okay, so audience, if you all have a question, Anil, would you like to be unmuted? Okay, let me see if I can do that. Okay. Is it okay if we take a verbal question? Is that fine? Like we can.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, Anil, go ahead, please, with your question.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now, na?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank
we can hear you.
Okay, sir. Actually, my company is manufacturing fertilizer using steel slag. Okay, so where the quantity of steel slag has been converted into fertilizer is quite a measurable quantity, and so that the carbon footage, whatever is because of the circular economy, and I'm converting that steel slag, which is a waste, converting into fertilizer is measurable. So in my case, it is very easy. And second, when this fertilizer is applied to the field, farmers are going to buy a price for the steel slag fertilizer. So unless until they get the benefit, they will naturally not buy my material. So I would like to know how this is, you can say that generating the evidence in my case will be highlighted.
Thanks, Anil. Is that a question to any of the,
So I need answers, so it can be answered by anyone.
Okay. So because this is, okay, I can just try my perspective on that. Like the way we were looking into the vehicle scrapping and reduce reuse. So what we were looking to do in that perspective is, let's say, for example, there is a particular metal composition of the particular things which you are converting into the fertilizer. So like, for example, when we were looking into how to save or safeguard reduction of scrappage of the vehicle, what we did is understood what is the metallic composition of a chassis, a body, and the structure of the vehicle. And then what we did is we found out, let's say there is a 10% aluminum which is there available into the vehicle. Then what is the energy which is required to basically decompose or basically, kind of melt the aluminum and extract it and for the particular usage again. So the energy which we are actually saving in terms of extracting that particular component or composition of material from that vehicle, that is what we are directly saving by extending the life of the vehicle. And from that perspective, what we did is, because let's say there are two components which goes, let's say, for example, in your use case, my take, there are certain things which will be recycled and reused. There is energy required and what you are saving out there. That's number one. Number two, in your case, for example, if you are using a fertilizer, you are actually uh, saving the consumption from a perspective of, sorry, I'll come to that. But before that, let's say there is a certain composition or a certain component of your raw material or the metal which cannot be recycled, and their way it will has to go for the landfill. So what is the landfill that you are saving? That becomes a second important parameter, because essentially we have only a limited land and we can't just keep filling it. So that is the second point. And number three, if for I don't know the fertilizer manufacturing process, or but whatever I can talk about it. For example, if you are making a urea or you are making any particular thing, then you are also using a certain raw material which you are actually saving. So whatever is the energy and the pollution which is basically reduced because you are using an existing component, that will be the three pillars in my perspective, which you can present as a direct saving from a climate tech that you are doing. And some portion of that will come under reduce, some portion will come under the reuse, and these are the two. And some portion will be recycled. So you are essentially using all the three, and then there is a carbon. So that's my take on that. But Srini, Aditi, if you want to add on.
Just to add what you said, Ashish, and I mean, one way of measuring it, because ultimately the fertilizer is being applied to a soil. So if you just go by fundamental 101 theory, then obviously you're impacting the organic content or the carbon content of the soil, which is measurable, right? Before applying this, what was the organic content, the NPK, soil carbon, the organic, which are there are methods available to test a soil, for example, of all its content before and after. What has been the change? Whether it's the organic carbon and all of that, right? So that can be measured. So maybe that is the difference. In addition to what Ashish said, it could be a metric, right? Before that, itna tha, iske baad itna ho gaya. So therefore, this is the saving that we have done. A, from the fossil fuel-based fertilizer, which is NPK, ammonia, and all that are based on fossil fuel. And this has already gone through a conversion process in a steel making process. So there's a lot of an embedded carbon in it, but you're not avoiding that as well. And then it's almost like, when you put a gobar gas versus an LPG, you're saving on fuel import costs, the dollar exchange, all of that get into the whole geopolitics of fossil fuel comes into play, right? Because India, as a country, we import most of these petro products from outside. So there could be multiple dimensions on which you can evolve a metric. But I think the key here is, what is the metric that really is the customer focused on? I think he will be more focused on fertility, production, improved production. Maybe those two things you can probably focus on, of conventional way of doing fertilizer and of using your slag-based fertilizer. What is the delta? What is the improvement in the yield and so on?
Perfect. Thanks, Srini. Anil, I hope that is answered. However,
Yeah.
I have just last 1 minute. So if there is any question pertaining to me, I would be happy to answer. If there is a generic question, just give it to 2 minutes, guys. All those who want to ask, then NSRCEL will take your questions to the respective speaker. Perfect. Thanks. I seen there is none directly. So thank you so much. It was lovely to be in this session. Kunain, NSRCEL, if you guys can take it forward. Or
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much, Ashish. That was an invigorating panel. Thank you so much for that discussion. We have a few questions coming in, so we'll jump onto those. And yeah, awesome. All right. So, okay, I see that there are a few questions in the Q&A section. We have one. My name is Mohammed. I run a startup by the name EcoCrew. Do you guys feel finance is a very important vehicle to solve any problem in the climate segment?
Hi, Mohammed. So just a plugin for EcoCrew. I have used EcoCrew. EcoCrew is an amazing product which Mohammed is building, and it helps you recycle your waste and recycle it well. The process is seamless. So I would just like I would just recommend everybody to just try it out, check it out. And Mohammed, to your question, yeah, for better or for worse, you are living in a world which is capitalistic, right? And your business has to make sense. So financing, maybe not, but what really matters is for the business to be sustainable. If you can get there without getting any kind of financing, amazing. In most cases, you would need some kind of financing to get there, but the goal is to have a sustainable business. The second angle to it is again like how fast do you want to grow? If you are comfortable growing slowly and sustainably, great. But if you want a rapid rate of growth, then again, that's where external finance sort of gives you more legs. So those are the two calls, or those are two things which you need to take care of. But yeah, Sheena, if you want to add something.
Yeah, I mean, for a company like us, finance is the lifeblood, right? No, that depends upon the scale, I guess, of the organization and the scale of the product. If it is a small scale project like a product like an affordable device or something, maybe finance may not play or may not play that big a role. But now for projects like that, which are capital intensive, finance does play a role. So especially for scaling. Right? So and then this the financing mechanism has to be aligned with the scale that we want to grow. As is rightly said, if we want to grow at a slow pace, then the financing, let's say, velocity would be less. But if you want to grow fast, then obviously you need more finance. So without money, which is the euphemism for finance, nothing works, right? So that is the money can either be paid by the customers, then it's a customer funded business, or it has to be sourced externally from a bank or an investor. Then it becomes an investor or a bank funded business. So, but you need money for any business to be sustainable.
Okay, we have another question in the chat from Sukriti. Sukriti has asked if you could share what are you as organizations doing to reduce carbon footprints of your own business operations? Is there a metric to measure that?
So I'll take a shot at it. So a lot of what we do is powered by solar. So in that way, there is an element of footprint, carbon emissions footprint reduction by design, and the function that we perform of reducing the foot loss. So there is an emission footprint that we are influencing in a manner which impacts water, carbon emissions, and so on and so forth. So there's an element, but we do not. I mean, at this point in time, we are not in a position to influence what are the embedded emissions in the solar PV panel, for example. What are the emissions that in the cold room building material? Now we take it from the market. So once I think we reach a scale, I mean, India as a country reaches a scale where all of these matter, and somebody is willing to pay a price for it. I mean, then yes, we can think deeper and say, okay, let's make solar PV panels with some biodegradable materials and so on and so forth. But right now we are not in that stage. Both we as a company and India as a country. Right? I mean, we have to get our fundamentals right first before we think about all these good elements, but requires a lot of time.
I mean, adding to what Srini said, yes, it's always very important to not lose sight of the larger picture, right, and understand where we are in the overall puzzle, especially as a country, as an economy. In the case of Terra, I mean, it is a software company, so it gets a lot easier when you don't have any hard assets. There are very standard methods and frameworks to measure the overall emissions of the company. In our case, whatever we had, we used to offset regularly. So all the offsets is probably not the best way of doing that. But in any case, the quantum was very small, right? So yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Harshini, I'm going to unmute you because I see you've had your hand raised for a minute. You can go ahead and ask your question now.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Actually, I'm a social entrepreneur on a mission to serve nature and its people through combating climate change. So, being a youth leader in this domain, I get to see a lot of international funding and quite a few fellowships also I won. Those are still not without grants. So, my question is, uh, sh- as an organization, can I rely on these grants and international funding for climate youth leaders like me? Or should it be, if in case I'm registering it as private limited, then international fundings cannot come and I should rely on my investors. But my goal is to not be in the for profit zone, but to have actual impact. So I would love to hear from the speakers their opinion and take on this. Thank you.
Adit, you want to go take this shot, or should I?
I can take this. I mean, you are asking two people who are for profit, so you know the kind of answer we are going to give. But I'll try to give a more generalized answer, right? So, I feel, I mean, if you can, that's a choice you have to make on the kind of company you want to build and the kind of entrepreneur you want to become, right? Impact can be created in both for profit, by being a for profit and by being a non-profit. Both come with their own advantages and constraints. When you are a for profit, you actually control the trajectory of your company, and you control the scope of impact you want to make. When you are a but then you also have the added burden of making it a sustainable business, right? When you're a non-profit, you let go of the burden of making it a sustainable business, but then the growth and the amount of impact you make is directly influenced by the amount of funding you are able to raise with your investors, right? So that's literally a call which you have to make on the kind of entrepreneur you want to become, right? Um, uh, if you are a for-profit, even in that case, you are eligible to a lot of philanthropic capital. But then if you are a for-profit, then you should never only rely on philanthropic capital. The goal has to make sure it becomes a sustainable business. If you are again, I am not the best person to answer from a non-profit perspective, so I won't even attempt. Shini.
I would say that when you're starting up, the color of the money should not matter. Whoever funds you, whether it's philanthropy capital or impact capital or public, let's say CSR funds, or if you want to be not for profit, obviously, then you have to, especially in India, when you're not sourcing foreign capital, but then you got to have the right kind of compliances, norms, and all that. Because if you have to attract, let's say, CSR funds from a private foundation or a corporate foundation, then they'll have norms, right? You have to meet some balance sheet criteria, some certification criteria. I mean, I'm not an expert on all these accounting standards, but no, people ask for ATG. I mean, there are many forms, you could look up, that one must have before you solicit, let's say, funds for a CSR foundation in India, for India. And at times it becomes difficult for a nascent startup to get into all those compliances, to be able to meet those, let's say, criteria. But then you can reach out to, let's say, many multilateral agencies who can support. In fact, we have, as a company, we followed that. I know in the first few years we relied on development sector finance, for example, from USAID, from German Development Agency, and so on. Because our scale was relatively higher and it required a great deal of capital. So you have to kind of choose, as Aditya rightly said, the right mix. You can, and if the intention is for not-for-profit, then you should have the right, let's say, compliances in place in India if you want to attract Indian capital.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. And followed by that question, I have small question. So when do you think is the right time to register our company or my venture? I just started it as a youth leader, like mobilizing youth and other things. So I would like to know, be it private limited or non-for-profit or Section 8, I would just like to know when is the right time to register.
I mean, for a for-profit,
when you have, sorry.
I was just saying for a for-profit, I mean, when you get your first customer, you should push it out as much as possible. But yeah, Shini.
Yeah, I think when you have the minimum viable product or a service ready that people have kind of, I mean, have at least started using, right? Whether it could be an idea, it could be a product, it could be a service, whatever that may be. You got to test it, in a target market before you really get down to saying, oh, hey, let me build a company around, right? Um, for every challenge or every, let's say, gap um, in the ecosystem, one need not necessarily make a company. You can probably work for a cause, initially, and then if it is kind of gels with what you want to do, then you probably can set up a company. I mean, so you can pursue both thoughts. So first, you have to test this whole idea that somebody is going to pay for you, whether it's a philanthropic capital or a private capital or whatever. Right? No, you got to first test it before you think about creating a company. And once you have traction, then of course, surely go ahead and set up a company.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for the answers. Thank you, NSRCEL as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Harshini. We have a quick 2-3 questions in the chat. So, okay. There's Parvez who's asked, as a BTech undergrad student in artificial intelligence and machine learning, what's the scope in approaching towards building a solution based on sustainability? And as a student, what projects could he go through and work upon in this domain? It is a bit of a specific, it's a bit of a niche question, I understand, but any advice?
I'll take this. So sorry, anyways. Yeah, so you have to, I mean, think of it as at the application layer, right? You can't build, I mean, if you want to build a foundational model or if you want to do some kind of deep tech work, then you won't find an intersection of AI and sustainability. But if you're thinking of the application layer, there are a bunch of spaces where artificial intelligence and Gen AI actually is very, very relevant in the case of climate. I'll just give a few examples, but you'll have to do more research, right? So for example, anything around remote sensing, that's just that whole industry is changing with the kind of AI applications people are making, right? That's huge. If you're doing anything around climate finance or carbon credits, right? There is a lot of AI that is being worked on in that space, and again, like very nascent, very good to go into right now. A lot of Gen AI muscle is required around the material science side of things. So if that's something which interests you, again, that's a place where an application layer in AI is extremely relevant, and a bunch of others, right? But the way to think about it is, again, like, what are the applications in this space which will also be relevant for Gen AI, and think of that as an application layer.
Awesome. Okay. Any other thoughts?
No, I think Aditya has covered the AI dimension. So I think.
And also, I think in the interest of time, because we have a bunch of questions, I mean, either of us will just like answer the questions so that at least we can answer all the questions.
Yeah. So, okay, then there's two more. So Kriti has asked if you would recommend to go for a B Corp certification.
Simi, you want to take that?
B Corp certification, I thought was, is there an equivalent of Indian B Corp? I don't know. I think B Corp is essentially US terminology. To my knowledge, like I said, I'm not this great expert on org structure stuff like that. But I think B Corp is anything that benefits others is a benefit corporation. It could be a social enterprise. It could be a not-for-profit. I don't know whether we have the same nomenclature in India, but yeah. If you're working for benefit, yeah, be a B Corp or a not-for-profit, private limited, LLC, doesn't matter.
I'll just add more context. So B Corp, basically, it's almost like an additional certification you have to go for. So you can be an NGO but not a B Corp, and you can be a for-profit and not a B Corp. So you have to have more compliance in order to get a B Corp. Getting that makes sense when that unlocks something for you. So there are a lot of grants which are only eligible for B Corps. There are a lot of investors who only invest in B Corps. So you have to think strategically and whether it serves you, because that is added work and added maintenance and added effort. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Then Shubhanshu has a question. Do you think technology is really essential for things as simple as farming, where traditional age-old factors have always been the center point? Also, coming to organic farming produce, the same being overpriced, how does accessibility, affordability, etc., become relevant here?
I'll just say, I mean, Srini will give a much more nuanced answer because that's closer to his work, but I'll just say that definitely not essential. I mean, what technology lets you do is scale up really fast. And so if you have a good solution, if you go down the technology route, then you will be able to scale up rather quicker. That's the uh, like that's one of the biggest levers which technology provides. That doesn't mean it needs to be like there are so many amazing entrepreneurs who are operating at a limited scale and they are doing totally non-tech stuff and they are doing some amazing work. For example, you can check out there's a venture called Jivantika where Arpit and his wife are running this entire eco village near Indore, and you should totally check it out. So there's a lot of such examples. But if you want to scale up, then I guess technology becomes essential. Shini, over to you.
No, I think technology just for the sake of technology doesn't mean anything. As long as you're solving a problem without using technology. And by technology, I do not necessarily mean AI, all these IT tech, right? Anything which solves your problem and makes your life easy is a technology. I mean, a technology could be as simple as designing a better shower, a better pickaxe, a better, it could be technology, right? It's not everything need not have an AI, IT, solar panels into it. Anything that improves the burden of a manual labor is also a technology. So I mean, based on the cause that you're working for, you can choose a technology or not choose a technology. Refine something which is already available, creatively, is also a technology, in my view. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, we have one last question. Shravan runs a mobile circular platform app for consumers. He asks if it's okay to burn some funds when acquiring the first few customers, and what's the ideal way to acquire first customers? What should be the best strategy to acquire new customers in burn rate?
I would probably, from my experience, I would probably advise him to kind of look out for before burning your money, which is, I mean, it's okay if you have a lot of money you can burn, but if to be wise, I think it's better to align with some ecosystem players who are probably trying to do a similar job and who are looking for a solution like yourself, to make their jobs easy. Maybe you can work with them, and figure out, if they can pay you some kind of a usage fee or something without you necessarily burning the money. But yeah, if it's something very exotic and very innovative and you want to put your own money to it and see if it works, then sure. But it's always better to not spend money if somebody is willing to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And general just product management rule of thumb, not just in climate, but generally for any software products is you should look at burning money as a channel of growth only when you have decent retention. So if you want to get really technical about this, think about the customer lifetime value and whether the cost of acquiring that customer is going to be less than that. You have a good CLTV only when you are able to solve retention. So, I mean, burning comes a lot later, and that comes when you have a few customers and you know that you can retain them and provide value. Then it is okay to maybe take a bet on burning. A lot of early stage startups make the mistake of burning money when they don't even know how to retain the customers, and then they shut shop. So don't make that mistake.
Awesome. Okay, that was all our questions. Thank you so much, Aditya and Srinivas. This was a great panel. I think the level of discussion was appreciated by many folks. So thank you so much for taking the time out to, talk to our audience about this. Before everyone leaves the call, just thank you, audience. Konen would like to take a minute and talk to you about the programs we have at NSRCEL that are relevant to your sectors and the solutions that you are building today. Over to you,
Thank
Konen.
you, Sam. Yes, thank you so much. First of all, Aditya, Shina, thank you guys for taking your time out for the webinar. Great discussion. Thank you guys. I'm just quickly going to take the audience through the sectors. Sam obviously gave an introduction on NSRCEL and what do we do at NSRCEL. But just going to slightly deep dive into one of our programs, that is the Sustainability Incubation Program. Just trying to see if I can share my screen. Hope this is visible.
Yes, it is.
Cool. So previously we've done the sustainability program with Alstom as our partner, and there have been 42 ventures which were incubated along with a corpus grant of about PCR, which was given in the previous two cohorts. These are just some impact numbers of the cohorts. So in the audience, if you're a venture building in either one of these sectors, that is energy, environment, or infra, and the subsectors that are given here, we would highly recommend you to apply to this program. If you're a venture who has a product, who is right now figuring out to scale, trying to figure out a product market fit or your channels, or how do you check your impact assessment, life cycle, what is the right way to raise funds? Because our offerings would range anywhere between here. So our offerings would range between customer adoption, capability building, scalable go-to-market, and sustained venture growth. So the program would be a very tailored program for 6 months. You'll have need-based mentoring. You will be given each mentor like an anchor mentor for the next 6 months for you guys to accelerate your growth. Along with this, we also have a mobility program. So if you're a venture building in any of the mobility allied sectors, specifically in clean tech, hydrogen fuel cell technology, energy storage, etc., this program would be a right fit. Sam has already sent the links to these in the chat. If there are any questions based on sectors or program specific questions, we'll be happy to take them. I think that's it. I probably will. Yeah.
I don't see any program related questions. We are running, we have short overtime. So just keeping in mind that, okay, maybe you want to give, I've dropped the links again for everyone to the programs in the chat box. Conan and I will hang around for a minute in case folks have any questions. We will share any information you need about the program, but we won't hold the panelists back. Thank you so much, Aditya and Srinivas, again. It was a pleasure hosting you all today. And it was a great session. So thank you so much for taking the time out. We hope to host you again and maybe at an in-person event.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll be very happy to attend. And the first time I'm talking to an audience in Bangalore. So thank you so much for inviting us. And it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. Nice chatting up with Aditya and Ashish. So hopefully we'll stay in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for inviting us again. It was a pleasure. Lovely having this discussion. Maybe next time we'll have it in person, and best of luck. Best of luck to everyone. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
And Bangalore has excellent weather, as Aditya said. So sure, anytime you call us.
And other things if you know the right places.
Thank you.
On that note,
The best weather. Yeah. Thanks all. Thank you. Conan, there's a question about the minimum age to apply. Maybe we can just take.
Minimum age. Yes, I'm assuming this is the venture age, incorporated venture age. So for sustainability program, it is anywhere between, if you're operational within the last 5 years, you're eligible for the program. And for the mobility incubation program, there is no eligibility age requirement. If you are just registered in India and working in mobility and allied sectors, you guys can apply for the program. I'm also going to drop in email in the chat where you can reach out to the Velocity team itself with any queries that you have. This email is also available on the website.
Awesome. So okay, yeah, there is no otherwise minimum age to apply when it comes to an applicant's age, if that is in what you are referring to. I hope that was helpful. Okay. Thank you all. This was a great session. Thank you for taking the time out and attending. Do take a look at the programs. We cover many sectors across both these programs, and you never know what might come of it. All programs at NSRCEL are free of cost. So yeah, take a look and reach out to us if you have any questions. That's all from our end today. Thank you for joining, and we hope to see you at future sessions. Thanks all. Thank you, Conan.
Thanks, Sam. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, guys.